any wargame, anytime.
Hello, everyone. It is another episode of Any War Game Anytime. We're really excited to have a really awesome guest in today. I think, yeah, it's just we've been wanting him to have on, and just we're just really have him. Really, just glad to have him on. But real quick, just check on Bozz. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm in the middle of printing myself out a couple of fantasy forces, which is good and fun, and kind of follows on directly from that episode we did a few weeks ago. And I'm just starting a Grimdark Future campaign tomorrow. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Oh, that looks so cool. Yeah, Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing okay as well. We haven't had the episode of convince Sam to do a sci-fi army yet, but I have been covertly making plans for that already. So we'll talk. That'll be a future thing possibly for y'all.
Yeah, watch this space.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me, I'm just about to start digging into 3.3. Got a lot of stuff in the works. Can't reveal it all right now, but needless to say, we got some cool stuff happening in the future. You'll find out more. But for now, we've got some cool stuff happening right now, and that is Austin from Dragon Trappers Lodge coming to talk about all the awesome work he's been doing, man. Austin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're gonna get into just some of the stuff that you do, and we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna, try to do our best to time box this because you just do so much great work over there that we are going to try. Okay, we could easily just talk about this all day, but real quick, Austin, tell us a little bit about your history in wargaming. How did you kind of find this little hobby?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually mostly played RPGs like D&D and stuff like that, and I would paint a lot of the minis, and there was a Warhammer store really close to my house, so I would just run to it was like almost across the street. I'd run to the Warhammer store in order to pick up some paint and brushes every now and then and primer and stuff like that. And I'd always look at the minis and always be tempted. And finally, one day, I convinced a bunch of my friends to all jump in and try it at the same time. And I chose the Seraphon, but I ended up printing all my models as proxies from Lost Kingdom miniatures. Thought they were super cool. And at the time, the Seraphon models I thought kind of looked dopey, a lot of them, especially like the baseline units. Now they came out with new ones. They look really cool. But so that was when I started Wargame. I had already started Dragon Trappers Lodge at that point. So we played that and I thought it was pretty fun, but my friends weren't into it as much. I think it was just like too crunchy for them. And then I heard about one page rules, and tried that and felt like that was much more up their alley and a simpler experience. It's way more streamlined and stuff like that. And that's pretty much the only war game I play these days now is one page rules. So
And that's awesome. And that's really how we heard about you because you guys are one of the, I guess, partner creators. Is that the wording? I know there's a specific word. It's partner creators, right?
yeah, we're one of their star creators. I think they have two of us up there now. So yeah,
Mhm.
we make armies for that are compatible with one page rules, and yeah, it's super fun.
We're gonna, so yeah, and we're gonna talk about because I think that Dragon Trappers Lodge sort of has a really cool thing that you do, but sort of so before we sort of get into your content, just to here's a question. Like you are a model designer, right? And you do this great work. So what was there some point where it just clicked into your head, oh, I want to create models. I want to start my own company and I want to do this. Like when did you decide to do this? Was this yeah, kind of just walk us through that process.
Yeah, so my background is as a 2D concept artist for like games and film and stuff like that and TV, specifically doing like creature design work. And I played a lot of D&D, and D&D can be an expensive hobby if you play it the way I like to play it, which is with lots of minis and lots of terrain and, fun goodies that totally are unnecessary. And I had, been teaching online courses for a while on digital painting and stuff like that, and I was kind of ready to move on to sort of my next thing. And I was 3D printing a lot of minis, and I saw a lot of minis in the space, specifically creatures and like dragons that were okay, but I just felt like I'm just a really big stickler for like creature anatomy, and I'd always think like I feel like I could do that better. Like I feel like I could make better creatures that look how I want them to look. And, like I said, it's an expensive hobby. And I was like, if I could figure out a way to write off all my D&D hobby as a tax write-off, that'd probably save me quite a bit of money. And so that's really where it started. I started off just me, and then pretty quickly realized like, okay, I'm gonna need to hire some more people. And so we just grew from there, hired more sculptors, and then eventually more concept artists for the first like maybe year or two. Um, I can't remember exactly how long, but for first while, all I was doing all the designs all just by myself, and then um, hiring sculptors to come on board and flesh out the 2D concepts into models. But now we have a full-fledged team of concept artists that I direct. We have sculptors. We have, everyone sort of pumping out stuff every month. So it's super fun, though. I'm glad I did.
Yeah,
How
and and it like I'll just say like it's really impressive just how much content and how much like divergent content Dragon Trappers Lodge like puts out. Like so like in and I want to kind of get your sort of thoughts on this. So generally when we think about like the custom army or 3D modeling space, you see a lot of creators who kind of take maybe like GW 40K or GW Fantasy Age of Sigmar, and they basically take that and just say tweaks or my little own custom, but a lot of the concepts are really just there, which is fine. That's all great. But
just enough to be legally different most of the time.
yeah, yeah. And I love some of that work. I love some of the variations on those things.
Yeah,
But
GW wishes that it wasn't just and has tried often in the past to uh, say that it's not legally distinct, but
yeah, but I think with Dragon Trappers Lodge now, a lot of your stuff, it seems like you guys are trying to do a different thing in that you're really just sort of off in your own thing, right? Like a lot of your work is just sort of really just off doing its own thing. Do you feel that like that's so I just want to know, is that harder to do to just come up, or is it, I mean, and I'm not a creative, but like it seems at least it would be a lot harder to like come up with a lot of this stuff like from you and sell that to your artists rather than just like I said, just going to another company or IP and just tweaking it, right?
I mean, it's definitely more work, but to me, that it's worth it. That's like the whole point. For me,
Yeah.
medium of creating models or even digital paintings or anything is really sort of a means to an end, and that end for me is more telling the stories and building the world. And these models and the stuff we make, the art just sort of serves as a vessel for that. So just copying existing IP, I mean, there's a market for it certainly, but it just never really appealed to me. And I mean, like you mentioned, there's already a lot of people that do that. In my mind, I want to be making models that no one else on the market makes. I want to be like, we are the only, cannibalistic ape men army in
Yeah.
the world. If you want that, we have it, this super cool army, right? Or we're the only World War I inspired dragon army, right? Like I want to make things that no one else has seen before because one, I just think it's way more fun and exciting to make and put out there into the world. And two, if you tie yourselves too heavily to like replicating like GW, for example, um, you're always sort of also chained to their success, which I mean, in the case of GW might not be the worst thing in the world. They're very successful, but I don't know. I just always thought it was a lot more fun to make things that no one has ever seen before than to just sort of copy other stuff out there. I mean, no shade on people who do that, but I don't know, just never been my jam. And that goes for our D&D side of things too. I always try to think of, I sort of tell people our tagline is monsters you won't find in the monster manual. Because if we are going to do, there's a billion goblins out there, a billion orcs, a billion space marine variants, whatever, right? I want to try and do something that has our unique spin on it that people haven't seen before because I think it's really satisfying when someone can take one of our armies or models to a game store and put it on the table, and people be like, "Holy crap! Like, where did you get this? That is so
Yeah,
cool,"
yeah.
Yeah.
and people be talking about it. You know what I mean? Instead of like, "Oh yeah, another this proxy or another that proxy."
That's why I love your Fey Petal Court stuff so much because it's an army of fairies and they look really cool. I've actually printed off a bunch of them now. And yeah, they're very, very striking. I haven't played with them, but even just to kind of have that and to look at, I haven't ever seen another army of fairies that look like they're girded for war, and I just think they're so cool.
Yeah,
Well,
they put a courts end up being, I think, maybe our most popular army, if not one of them. So
I'm
yeah.
not surprised.
yeah, pays off to just carve out your own niche, I think.
Well, you
Well,
you
I
get
think
you get extra bragging rights when you crush your opponents with an army of fairies, right?
True. True.
but I think you're hitting on something too, because I guess we should amend something. So there are people doing, because we're all talking about armies. Yes, there are other creators who are making kind of unique models, right? Oh, look at this awesome one unique model. But that's the other side that I think really takes Dragon Trapper's Lodge up the level is that you really build out army. You take a concept, but you also build, like you said, an army with the various weapon options, right? It's something that someone doesn't like. Like not only can you have, oh, I don't need to just have a single Fey fairy, on a bug or something. No, you produce an army so that they really can bring, and not a lot of people are doing that, right? Who sort of commit to that concept so much that it's like round out everything with special weapons, with everything, with standards
I
musicians. Yeah.
it really is pretty fun. I mean, I remember back when I was first doing Kings of War and like trying to come up with unique kind of army concepts and like piecing them together from different
Mhm.
model lines. And oftentimes it was like, I mean, I spent a lot of time on Reaper, the Reaper website, just looking for the things that I want. And it was, uh, sometimes you could get something that kind of look cohesive, but it's really nice to see when you've got these kind of concepts, but they're really well fleshed out. I mean, it is pretty impressive, um, in terms of I think how the things look good together. There was really an eye to that, which is it's a huge plus when you're trying to put together an army.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was at the beginning it was a bit of a trial by fire since, didn't have that much experience with it. Like I said, it was mostly D&D, but we hired Zarask, who's a big sort of staple of the OPR community on Discord, as our sort of resident army expert, and he's been with us ever since. And him and I worked together to design the armies from the rules up, and then, the physical designs and the models and stuff like that. And because we don't want it to just be like a tacked on afterthought. We feel like it's really obvious and apparent. You can tell when, a creator army is just like, I sort of compiled these models, which we have some of that, especially in the beginning, but we've tried really hard to sort of flesh those out and sort of revisit them and make them a little bit more robust with like the weapon options you're talking about and stuff like that, and make each army feel like it has a distinct play style. Like, what is you know, we want each army to feel like there's something for each type of player. Someone who wants to play really aggressive, or like the fairies who are way more agile, right? They're flitting around the board really quickly and, claiming objectives, stuff like that. So, but man, you guys are just loading me with compliments.
Well, it's good.
Well,
It's good work. So I mean, I really want some of these. I've been browsing on my mini factory while we're talking, and I want some of these Darkland centaurs. That's like, oh, I've always wanted to put together an old centaur army, but most of the centaur lines out there are just god awful. So
Just
but no,
quite
it's something
cheesy.
that is especially come from OPR. I think we want to just, like I said, our listeners come watch this to talk about the advantages of going with Dragon Trappers. Like you said, there's a lot of creators out there, but Dragon Trap is one of the few that's not just creating an awesome army. You've got a really well thought out OPR list. So it's all this work that a person who isn't an expert army builder, who isn't an expert with green stuff, who doesn't, like you said, who doesn't have the time to find everything, they can get this army and they can literally print out the thing. Okay, I can magnetize. It's all there, right? Like we know this hobby thing is, it's touted right in the hobby, but a lot of people just don't have the time and energy to green stuff or to put stuff together, or don't want to pay OPR for their custom art. It's all that's just there that it's so much easier.
Well, and we are
Um,
we are living in kind of the golden age of miniature printing now too, right? I mean, this is a thing that even 10 years ago was not really possible because there wasn't the prevalence of the technology, there wasn't the level of sophistication with it,
And the
and
affordability.
and the affordability too, right? I mean, now it's like it's very easy to, there's always somebody in the community who's got a 3D printer, and oftentimes three or four people now, and they're a lot more affordable. And kind of what I think part of what we want to do here too is kind of show people what's out there in terms of like if you're looking for uh alternatives to buying just GW models or whatever, or buying like any big companies models, like we kind of live in the age now where that's never been easier.
Yeah, like if you don't have the time or the inclination to kit bash something from scratch, there's other options these days. And yeah, Dragon Trappers is a really good one. You do some really kind of unique takes on just fantasy armies. They're really cool. As
yeah,
you say, things as unique as, World War One style dragons. Who does that?
yeah.
Someone does, and someone wants them, and there they are, just waiting for them.
Yeah.
Um, so talking with you, and we've talked with you before. One thing that struck me talking with you was how really your lore, like you weren't like, I remember talking with you before, you weren't like shuffling around with your notes about the lore. You were just like, oh yeah, it's this and this and this. And it's like you seem to have a really clear view of the lore. And maybe you hinted at this before. Do you like start with the lore, or do you sort of go with the models? Like, are you sort of that narrative in your head? Or is it the visual in your head that sort of maybe that sort of what do you call it, the seed? Where does that start, from visually or from narrative?
I'd say it's a pretty even mix of both. It's kind of hard to define which comes first. For example, like, I mean, we have the concept of in our lore of like the Dragon's War and sort of how it started and who the bad guys or the initiators of the conflict were. And we have several armies that we haven't created yet that we have fairly well fleshed out lore-wise that we plan to make someday. But we also have a lot of space in the lore for new ones that we haven't thought of yet to sort of fit in. So sometimes we might come up with a really cool idea, or maybe we do a lot of times we'll do a D&D set that will either be really popular or we'll have some really cool models in that, and we'll think, I wonder if we, because each D&D set has like a story, like an adventure module with it. And more than once now, we've taken that adventure module and sort of continued like, okay, this was sort of the precursor to this army, and it sort of expands in the lore because the lore for our OPR world and the D&D world are one and the same world, right? So sometimes it stems from that, from existing models. Sometimes, like for example, the Heralds of the Apocalypse, that's an upcoming army we plan to make of basically apocalyptic fallen angels who have just accepted that they have failed to save the world from incoming destruction and now believe that the best way is to just sort of usher in the end times and have everything start over, right? Those are guys that we have built into the lore a long time ago, even though we have no models for yet. So it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of it depends. I'd say it's a give and take, Um, and especially
Yeah.
now that we've hired some writers and it's not just me doing all of the all of the heavy lifting and stuff like that. I'd say it's even more of sort of like a blend because like we have like an internal Discord where we have all of the creative team on there, and so like the artists, the concept artists might be like come up with an idea that just looks really cool, and then we figure out, okay, how do we fit this into the lore, or vice versa. The writer might be like, hey, what about this? And the concept artist will try and come up with something. So it's sort of a big blend until we sort of keep slowly honing and refining and chiseling away the rough edges until we get that final result that fits into the final painting of the world, so to speak.
Hmm. Okay. Um, just as another, so you kind of started up on your own with just a kind of a one-man writing design. Was there a big transition for you to, because it sounded like you started hiring people. Was that hard for you to sort of make that transition from the kind of person that's really hands-on to have other people sort of take your maybe baby and kind of do something, and you have to do you how have you made that transition from, like you said, from sort of a hands-on person to a little more of a director, you know?
Yeah, at the beginning, very early on, it was pretty hard to sort of feel like you're just like letting go of control of your baby. But very, very, very quickly, the 30-day turnaround deadline time frame of being on Patreon beat that out of me pretty fast. And it was like,
Yeah.
look, if you want to hire people, you need to like let them do their thing. And I still direct, right? I still, hone in, or you say we need to rework this or whatever, but you do have to sort of pick and choose the battles you want to fight of like, okay, we could rework this, but it's going to take a whole week to completely redo this. And so, it was hard at first, but now not really, because I think the big part too is just working with people who understand the vision and who are really good at what they do. And all the people we work with now are really, really solid. I feel like rarely do I, look at something and be like, this is terrible or this is totally off base. Like, we're pretty in tune with what we're trying to produce. And so, yeah, I don't really feel like I have to worry about that because my team is really, really good at what they do, and, they can come up with all sorts of cool ideas. So
It feels
How
good too, doesn't it? When you kind of build something and invite people into it. I
it feels,
mean, it kind of feels good when you build something and invite people into it too, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
it is. I mean, and to be honest, I'm still the director, so it is cool to be like, hey, here's this idea I came up with, flush it out, and then it gets done. It does feel exciting to, not a lot of people get that opportunity,
mm,
for most of us out there who start out as hobbyists, it is all the slave labor of ourselves, just, working away and spend the hours and hours and hours. And I just feel super privileged and lucky to be able to have a whole team that I just get to expand my own world, even though, it's gonna be for customers that we're gonna sell and stuff like that. It does feel lucky at times, to be like, wow, I never would be able to accomplish all of this if it was just me on my own.
mm.
So how big is your team? Like what kind of team does it take to pump out the pure volume of product that you do month by month?
So right now we have that's a great question. As far as like the creative team goes, we have three 2D concept artists, including myself, give or take, contractors will come and go at times. Um, but three regulars plus myself, and then we have a sculpting team of about eight regulars of
Nice.
sculptors every month. And then as far as like the writing team and stuff goes, we have Zarask who does the war game stuff. And then we have Robert, he's doing adventure modules, and then now also starting with the current army we have this month, part two of the Moon Enclave. They're like our werewolf themed army. He's writing up lore, like a lore PDF, as well as 5e stat blocks for all the army models, so that you can sort of just like use them interchangeably. So like if you're doing a D&D campaign and your players are recruiting, certain factions and stuff like that for, these big events, you can sort of seamlessly go from those same exact models with 5e stats into OPR stats, and they
Yeah.
all sort of line up. So like we've made like a whole guide basically where like, in OPR you might have like fast or flying. Those ones are obvious to translate into D&D, but maybe you have something like Predator or stuff like that, where we have like a table that's like this ability in OPR equals this ability in D&D, and then he's doing all of that, as well as the lore, because we always have a little blurb of lore like on the OPR thing, but we wanted to make like a full PDF that goes into like several pages of like the faction's origins and their role in the war, how they entered it, as well as like lore about each individual unit in the army, of like, here's where these unit, what their sort of status is in the army, or how they came to be, or any relevant cool stuff like that. Like an example would be like the Moonborn. Basically the Moon Enclave are werewolves who tried to resist their urges to kill and be evil, and sort of help the people in the villages they were in. But eventually, when they got found out, they were ran out of town, and they retreated to these, the secluded woods, and basically started their own, sort of community. Over time, other lycanthropes heard of this and came to join. And through their sort of spiritual connection with the moon god, they eventually just fully embrace their werewolf nature and lose their ability to turn back into humans
Mm.
permanently in their sort of werewolf form, and they become these super powerful, super strong, much larger than your average werewolf, and they've just completely embraced this instead of trying to fight it, and in doing so learn to sort of control their temper and their anger and stuff like that. The Moonborn are a faction or a member, a unit in the army that are sort of like our heavy cavalry. They're really big, these basically like giant wolves. And the Moonborn are basically werewolves who have embraced this transformation more than any other people in the Moon Enclave. And they've embraced it so much that they've basically turned into a full-on giant wolf. They can no longer speak, but they're still sentient, they're still intelligent, but they're just like powerful, massive wolves that the rest of the Moon Enclave has a lot of respect for as they've sort of gone the farthest into this sort of transition. So having lore like that we could flesh out for the different units, and what their role is going to be super exciting. Anyways, you got me talking about lore.
No,
But
and that's awesome. And
yeah,
that's what it's really good you did that because that's what we wanted you to have because that's what we picked up, which is that passion. It's like you and I'm guessing that probably affects you having such detail about how the personality, probably that level of detail of the personality of this creature probably makes its way into the models, right? Even if it's a slight maybe mannerism of the face or something. I'm guessing there. I don't create models, but that's what I would sort of guess, right? That little minute details in the lore sort of make their way into the models, right?
yeah, we tried to. We tried to think, keep that in mind as we're designing even when we get to the sculpting phase, sometimes we'll, even though they have the concept art right there, it still help to be like, all right, here's the concept art, and you're basically just going to copy this, but here's sort of what we're going for ideal wise, like lore wise with this, and it just can help in really tiny things, just like the way they're posed, yeah, they're all standing there holding a sword and a shield, but are they standing there confidently? Do they feel like they're slinking? Do they feel like they're timid? Like giving that just a little bit, even if it's, I mean, especially at miniature scale, it might be like half a millimeter difference in the angle of the head or stuff like that, but that can make a big difference in how they sort of read when you're looking at them.
And I like I like the idea as well of kind of including blurbs about each individual unit and how they kind of fit into the army. That was one of the things when I first started wargaming with Games Workshop and High Elves was my army. One of the things I loved on the GW books were so good at is they'd have like little things about each of these units and like where they come from, why they exist, what their kind of goals are, how they fit in with the army, and that was always a huge a thing that appealed to me when I first got into wargaming and even now. And it's something that I think is missing too often in a lot of war games now, where they kind of, even if they'll have like a faction overview or something, it's kind of you have like the overview of the faction.
You want it to go deeper.
I want it to go deeper. I want to know why these things within the faction exist, why they function the way they do, and because sometimes, and I think this plays out when you're designing rules and such too, is if you don't have that idea, you wind up with stuff in your army list that's kind of like, why is this here?
Yeah.
And it's not cohesive. And when you have something that's kind of not cohesive and just looks like it's slapped together, like players feel that and they pick up on that, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to play this because this is just kind of,
Yeah. It's like this thing is vaguely related to the theme of this army. Let's fit it in here. Yeah, I agree. I think that when it comes to lore, I really feel like one of the things that has made Games Workshop so successful is that it's not just the models are cool, it's not just like the fighting, it's not just the painting hobby. It's that you can, in your own mind, flesh out the story for your army and why they're doing what they're doing, and you can create little stories for the individual units and stuff like that. And I think that a big part of it is that when you have really good lore for your army, it makes you way more attached to them. It makes you want to win more because you're like, even if they're, I know that some people have their views on whether or not armies should be good or bad, or if it should just be neutral. Personally, I like, let's make some good armies and some bad armies. I think people still like playing bad armies. I like playing bad armies. It's really fun to be like, my objective is to just like annihilate all mankind or whatever, and just to lean into that and have all the lore of like, here's why they're doing it and what their units are, and just like that satisfaction of just annihilating your opponent, or being the good guys. And
blood for the blood god, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm a narrative war gamer primarily. Like, it's all about the story that I'm telling about my individual units, about my overall army. It's about that unfolding story over time.
Right.
you
Same.
know.
Yeah, that's what I like. And if that's what you like too, you'll be excited with some of the stuff we have coming up pretty soon that we're working on.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's something I said. I think if you're interested in getting some, I think that's what makes Dragon Trappers Lodge take that next step. It's the comprehensiveness. You're thinking about D&D. You're literally, here's a model, here's the lore, and you're taking it across the game systems so that people don't have to do that like they do with Sims. So you already mentioned one of these cool projects, which I'm already interested in, these Fallen Angels. So maybe a little sneak
Yeah,
peek or
yeah,
just some.
you got to get on that because I need more angel miniatures for my old angel army that I also want to do.
Hey,
So
get in the Patreon polls and vote. That's all I could say. We go by what people vote for. So hopefully that one will be coming up soon because I want to do that one too. I think that'd be really cool.
any other little cool projects that you got kind of coming down the pipe? Anything that yeah, what I mean, maybe our listeners aren't Dragon Trappers Lost, so maybe give them a little sneak peek about, like I said, what would be something cool in the future to be watching out for.
Well, I'd say the two big things as far as the army goes are, like I said, the Moon Enclave, which is our part two of our werewolf army, is wrapping up this month, so they can go pick that up. The next army, though, after that will be Acolytes of the Primordials, which will be a dinosaur-themed army. We wanted to do. We know there's a lot of dinosaur armies out there. They're really popular, right? So we want ours to be different. It's not just lizardmen, they're actual like saurians, and the army is largely focused on defense. The Saurians are like Triceratop people and Stegosaur people and stuff like that, and they're just these huge, beefy, really heavily armored, dinosaur guys with lots and lots of monsters. So that's really exciting. That one's coming up. And then the next big project is a crowdfunding campaign. I can't give you the exact release date yet, but I can tell you what it's going to be, which is going to be the Fey Petal Courts versus the Dark Woods narrative campaign.
Ooh.
So it'll have some brand new units for both armies, a new hero for both armies. We'll be adding objective markers, themed objective markers for both armies, as well as terrain pieces for the narrative campaign that are, custom designed for the campaign and like, story elements. It's not just like random generic scatter terrain. It's like this is sort of the Sword of Ambrose Thorn that everyone's trying to get. And these are the portals that are going to release the Darkwood satyrs and stuff into the world. And so that we're pretty excited about. That's what we've been really putting a lot of time and effort into is creating a nice big book that's sort of like it's going to cover, some pretty deep dive lore into the origins of the conflict. And for us, one of the things that I thought would be really fun to do is that in war games, obviously every army can fight any army, and you can always come up with reasons or justifications for why they're fighting and stuff like that. But I thought it would be really cool is if each army had like an arch enemy army, right? Where it's like, yeah, these are enemies, but these guys in particular, these are who we really hate. Like we have specific beef with them. And so the Darkwoods and the Fey Petal Courts have a past that caused them to be especially sort of bitter rivals with Pan, the Fawn Sire, who sort of heads the Darkwoods, at one point having tried to overthrow Malvesa, the queen of the Unseelie courts, and sort of overthrow her, and him getting banished to the Darkwoods, and that sort of being the foundation for where their sort of rivalry begins, and then eventually their introduction to the overall Dragons War. So it's going to explore all of that. It'll have a whole bunch of new cool stuff. You'll be able to get the new units as well as the old armies, the original armies at like a discount. So that will be coming up here in the next few months. So we're pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
That's awesome to like have, like I said, have new people come in and ability to kind of get in on all this awesome stuff. Oh man, I could and this is something that man, we'd love to have you back on and just maybe just the next time we have you on, if you'd like, come on and just we could talk about one faction's sort of like deep dive, right? Because there's just like I said, just hearing it, there's so much we could get into.
Yeah. It's like Daniel said before, it's so obvious that, you're not shuffling through notes. This is all in there, and it's really cool to listen to.
Mhm.
I mean, you guys, you have no idea. I would come on every week to talk about lore. I can talk about lore stuff all day long. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, this is
it's,
why,
it's the eternal struggle of finding somebody to listen to that, though. I could do the same, and it's
and like that's the reason like I did that one video for you, but like because I said it's such a cool world and I love what OPR is doing with this. Like I I think that you guys have picked up something with OPR, which I think a lot of companies haven't quite figured out yet, which is that like this is really the future, I think, honestly. You've got this kind of OPR as a framework, and then really it's basically D&D with war games, right?
That's
It's
exactly
like,
how I view it. I as soon as they opened that up, I
yeah.
was like, this is gonna be like, in my opinion, this is gonna be like the next thing because
Mm.
it's way cheaper, it's way easier to get into. There's so much more flexibility and creativity, and it's gonna be like if you can think of it, you can find it in OPR eventually, just like it is with D&D. Like
Mhm.
there's source books for everything. And yeah, I agree. I think that this is probably going to be an iteration of this is going to be the future of wargaming, if not this exactly. So I was like, we're getting in
Mhm.
the beginning, and it's been super fun ever since. And it was really successful too. I wasn't sure if we'd be able to pull enough OPR players or if our current D&D users would care, but we started that about a little less than a year and a half ago is when we released the first army, the Children of the Flame, and we're about half and half with our backers who are I mean,
That is
including
great.
people who are backed at both. I would say about half of our people subscribe to both tiers who want D&D and OPR, and then the rest is sort of split
Yeah.
fairly. So,
That's awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you back, like you said. But real quick, so we're going to close it here, but we always like to finish with one question, which is our guests. We like to ask them, okay, we're all gamers here. We all sort of live our lives, and we have these hobbies that we have to sort of, time box and fit into real life, But if time, so as we always say, if time or money were not a factor, you're Jeff Bezos level rich, and you're retired, you have all this time, and just if time and money were not a factor, what would your dream wargaming experience be?
well, to be honest, like I said, I'm pretty lucky because whenever we make a new army, I can send it to our painters and be like, all right, paint this entire army up, and it will get shipped to me, and I get to use it for marketing. But I also now have a brand new painted army that I designed, which is spoils me rotten, right? But aside from that, I would say and I mean, I think this is possible. I think we might be able to get to this point someday. What I'd really like to do is to organize a really big sort of escalation narrative campaign that is sort of like tournament style, where the outcome of that affects the actual lore of the story and is on like a pretty wide scale, right? That we can work into, the next chapter of the Dragon's War, whatever happens after that. So that would be mine is organizing some large scale event, and I want to be able to play in it because I can always organize them, but I always feel weird being like, all right, I'm the one giving prizes and I set this all up and also I'm playing. So but yeah, luckily where I live out in Salt Lake. We have a pretty active OPR community out here actually, and people get together pretty regularly. I'd say almost every week to play. So it's not certainly not outside the realm of possibility.
Nice. Well, I love that you see the expansive narrative campaign as a dream. And that to me, that speaks that you don't want to make this some sort of cheap gimmick. I've seen other companies who sort of, oh, we're going to do a narrative campaign, and it really doesn't matter, right? It's just like, oh, what you all didn't matter. We're going to do it. It's almost like it sounds like you look at it that no, this really needs so much attention to and that's great that you want it isn't some sort of cheap gimmick. You'd really want the narrative campaign to really mean something,
Yeah.
which is I think a lot of the community wants and
Yeah, I think that's
oftentimes
really
doesn't
cool.
get. Yeah, yeah.
Like things that matter, that actually keep on mattering in 10 years' time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would love to do something like that. Our first narrative campaign that I mentioned with the Feywilds and the Darkwoods, that one's sort of like it's like a prequel to like their introduction, so it has like a canon ending, even though you can play out how you want it to be. But yeah, in the future, it sure would be cool to. I'm honestly, I don't even know how to organize that because, like I
Yeah.
said, I don't have that long of a history of wargaming, right? It's fairly recent in the past couple years, but when I heard about those, I was like, that sounds awesome. Like that would make me want to play my army so bad and just be like, I have to win. Like I can affect the future of this game
Yeah.
forever, like you said. Um, yeah, hopefully we'll see. Hopefully we can get enough people interested. That's always the other hard thing is getting enough people who could participate. But
Nice. Well, we're going to post the links in the description, but could you just shout out a couple of ways to reach out to you in case, just if they're listening, just give us a few places they can go to find Dragon Trappers Lodge.
Yeah, you can go to patreon.com/Dragon Trappers Lodge would be the main place, and you can always shoot us a message there. Or, we're on My Mini Factory. You can search Dragon Trappers Lodge on My Mini Factory. And then we also have a pretty active Discord server that has, in my opinion, some of the best help and support in the industry. They're extremely helpful in helping you troubleshoot printing problems or building your army list, like literally anything. And it doesn't even have to be just Dragon Trappers Lodge models. People come in from other creators all the time just to get help because our support team is just really, really helpful. So anyone's always welcome, and you can post your armies, whether they're ours or anyone else's. People also post and painted models in there all the time from all sorts of different creators. So everyone's welcome. But yeah, those are the three big ones.
Nice. Thank you so much, Austin. And yeah, we'll definitely have you back on. All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, Sam.
Go where the game is good.
Where the game is good.
Any war game, anytime. Going where the game is good.